Hey, what's up everyone? Sean here, and welcome to another new video. Now, I wasn't sure if I was going to make this kind of video, but I feel like it's definitely important and relevant enough topic to kind of discuss, which is the CEO changeover of Apple Inc. of John Ternus becoming the new CEO, I believe in September, if I'm not mistaken, of 2026. And I'm just gonna give my thoughts on it, and as an Apple lover and Apple enthusiast that's owned Apple products for now over 25 years. Like my first smartphone was an iPhone, and again, all the products I use daily that I've owned for years and years and years are all made by Apple essentially, and I love them for that reason, and also have had some many disappointments over the years too with what they've come out with in pricing and all that kind of stuff. And even more so, I actually used to work for Apple Retail many years ago, and it was right after actually when Steve Jobs passed away, when Tim Cook officially took over as Apple CEO. That's when I was in that relative term at a retail store. I just did sales there, and I'm not going to talk about that part of it, but it but I was part of the system for a little over a couple of years, and it definitely shaped my retail experience because when I was in my 20s and late teens, early 20s, I worked many retail jobs of just different types and mostly sales, that kind of thing. And Apple was very different in every process that they were part of. And when I found out that John Ternus, who I'm not really familiar with that well, I know I have his Wikipedia page pulled up for knowledge, just to find information about who he is, what he's done, how long he's been with Apple, and all the details about him. And it makes sense now that I see like his job description, his education history, like why he would be the right fit, essentially to take over from Tim Cook and so on and so forth. And I just want to give credit where credit is really definitely due. Now I don't agree, or I didn't agree with some things that Tim Cook always did, but he also had a very you know difficult job, not just as CEO, but his takeover. And I want to talk about that too a little bit. And that's where I will kind of dive into now, because for me, Apple became Apple for many of us, not all of us, but many of us, for like my generation of a millennial, where when Steve Jobs, when the iPhone was a thing, introduced, as far as I should say, when the iPad was introduced, those that was really the time of my life, at least, where I was heavily influenced by literally every bit of news that Apple put out, or every product that they released, or whatever it was. It had a heavy influence on my life. I was a very heavy techie back then. I'm not really anymore, because I still use everything, and I still watch all the keynotes, and do my due diligence in that, and due diligence in that format. But I don't look up like any more rumor websites to see what's coming up in the next 2 years anymore. So I've changed in that aspect of everything. But back in the day, I was very heavy tech, very heavy tech, because at the time, in my opinion, back then, right when, again, after Steve Jobs passed away and Tim Cook took over and kind of made things his own, that to me is still the most formula. I don't know what the right word is for it, but the most kind of like most exciting thus far time at Apple, whether you're buying products or not, because they were inventing things. They had true, in my opinion, true innovation more back then than they do now. Because now I feel like they're much more of a, just much more of a deadline company, where they know that, like, what's expected of them every year, like when it comes to new software, new devices every year, and then kind of making, like, it's like, how thin can we make things, how much more 30, 40, 50, 60, but whatever percent faster than the previous generation was, or 2 years ago, 3 years ago, how much faster can it be, how much thinner can it be, how much thinner can a camera be, how much better focus can it, like, all those things, which are cool. But to me, the original, when I got into Apple, and when I was blown away by them, was back in those days where it was much more of a professional product that mainly people use when they were either primarily either in a creative environment. And I don't mean YouTube. I mean, like, when they were working on film, or when they were a professional, or a hire for like a photographer or whatever. Again, it was before or right around the time when the iPad was announced, when the iPhone was announced, because there was a good like 4 or 5 years there where everything that Apple did pretty much hit gold. And I remember the days where you couldn't even really, sometimes couldn't even like walk into an Apple store and get an iPhone or get an iPad. They were sold out because it was so popular, and the production was so new and was so unique and so novel that it was hard to get. I remember those days, and it was back when retail shopping, like in-store, in-person retail shopping, was a much heavier trafficy thing for how you got your product. It was no. These days, everything is literally online, like, which is fine. I have nothing against that, but everything is online now, and you can pre-order things and get pre-financed like before like minutes after the phone is even announced by Apple. You can now like get your financing finished and wait for it to show up at your door. And back then that didn't exist. That wasn't a thing yet. So again, I will give credit where credit is due to Tim Cook, because he took over like again after Steve Jobs passed away, which was not an easy thing to do, because Steve Jobs, to my memory of him, of besides like watching videos of him in old keynotes, which I used to do a lot more too, was just his enthusiasm, his simplicity for products and things like that, and how he seemingly refused to release things that didn't make a difference or didn't change the world. And I will preface that though by saying that he didn't know what would change the world. He just wanted to throw it out there, because a lot of things that even Steve Jobs did failed in early Apple days. And if you watch any of the documentaries about any of this stuff, you can find out that information too. But I would say one thing, that because I know that Tim Cook came from what's the line? It was for, as far as like his job at Apple before CEO, I believe was for what's the word for it? It's for basically like processing, shipping, that kind of thing, like making sure that like everything was that they had enough product, if I'm not mistaken. I forget what it actually was. I haven't done a deep dive on him in a while, but I will give Tim Cook major credit where credit is due, again, like I said before, where he has, in his tenure now, he has very successfully gotten Apple away from their older stuff as far as like chips go for every device. If you remember back in the older Apple days, they were primarily completely based off of older chips. My brain's not there today. By the other company, not Apple, the other company but they invented. It's been so long that I forgot what company it was. But they invented their own chip. There's now like the M chip, the W chip, all those like M1, M2, M3, M1 through 5, all those chip types, and those are now the most popular. I mean, the products that they're in is the most sold stuff across the marketplace for the most part, for overall. And so I remember when the Apple silicon chips started to come out, and they didn't announce anything about it besides like announcing the chip and the technology behind it and what it did for you. And I remember when the first chip came out, like the M1 chip for the first computer, first laptop, when that came out, and when people got the actual computers for the first time, and they were blown away by how much more efficient, how much the fan wasn't used in the computers that it was on. And it was Intel, my bad. Intel was who Apple used, and pretty much every manufacturer used back then, before Apple Silicon took over for their own stuff. So Intel was the main driver of chips for graphics and processing before Apple Silicon was invented on its own. And again, I remember when M1 came out, and I remember seeing all the reviews for like the first Mac with an M1 chip on it, and how everyone was very impressed and blown away by it. And again, efficiency, and then they could finally like tout all day battery life on a computer, and the graphics performance was insane, and the fans. I remember when the MacBook Air was announced, and it was because of the efficiency of the M chip in that one too. So again, I give Tim Cook credit for whether or not he had anything to do with the actual development. Obviously, he didn't, because that's not his job as CEO. But taking over from a creative and a driven, successful person as Steve Jobs was, couldn't have been easy in any way. I know they worked together for a long time, and I fully understand that. but to take over those reins and then also move the company forward into the future. Because Tim Cook, from what I'm reading here, is that or memory, is that he became CEO in 2011, and now we're in mid 2026. So a little over, 16 years of CEO, and it's the right time for him to retire. He's 65 years old, and it's interesting because John Ternus, the new CEO, is 51. So interesting to me that when Tim Cook became CEO, relatively speaking, he was the same age as how old John Ternus is now. I find that a little bit interesting to me. I thought they maybe would have gone younger for a new CEO, but maybe they just want to have someone with experience of everything, because John Ternus, his current role is SVP of Apple in general, and I think that they always give out these really massive kind of I don't say generic, but these kind of like all-encompassing roles for titles of what they actually do in the company, whereas they used to be like, SVP of hardware design, and now it's way more different stuff and all that. But again, I give Tim Cook major credit for how Apple, I should say, handled the whole Apple silicone transformation and transfer over from Intel chips over to their own stuff, because again, they have 5 or 6 product lines. Again, they have, the Pro Max, they have the regular Max, iMacs, which is all one thing essentially by itself. They have the Apple Watch, iPhone, iPad, like all those things, like all those use Apple chips, Apple silicone to run them. And even the headphones now with Beats, when they bought Beats and that kind of thing, and their AirPods and Max, all that is using Apple silicone to run everything that's inside them. So I remember when the first Mac came out with the Apple silicone, and I remember that I didn't know or really care at the time, but I didn't really know if like when it was first announced that they were going to that they end up doing a major overhaul to their own chipsets. I know there was a reason for it, and I thought it was at the time. I really remember. I remember thinking that they were only doing it to cut down on the cost of production and the cost of paying Intel for their chips as well. And I remember Intel was having a very tough time anyways, because all the Intel chips that were running or that ran the higher end MacBook Pros, like the one I used to have, they had issues because of the overheating thing, and the fans were super obnoxiously loud, and all that kind of came, and all that was involved with that. And then again, I remember when the M1 came out, and then and that computer just was silent and all day battery life, and so Apple did a great job, in my opinion, or Tim Cook did a great job, in my opinion, of handling that transfer. And they didn't do it, remember, they didn't do it as far as transformation goes, and the transfer between Intel and Apple stuff, in like 6 months or a year, and they didn't do everything at once. I remember they took their time. They like Apple always does. They take forever for everything, but to their benefit, they took their time, and they did one product line at a time. They did new stuff. They announced new things like pretty much every year with and then they continued to also advance them too. It was not just like M1 existed for 5 years. It was more of like M1, then M2 very quickly, M3 very quickly. It was the advancements in their silicone team for development was insane for a long time, and it really still is, honestly, and it's super impressive. Again, because I remember that it seemed like they did not want to rely in any way anymore on Intel and their team, and how bad of an experience that that Intel product became for them overall. And I don't mean to talk down on Intel, but for how bad and warm and hot and overheating those computers became at times, it was definitely a needed thing too as well. And so again, I give Tim Cook major credit for that major change and overhaul of the transformation from Intel to Apple Silicon. Now, there's some other things I wish that they didn't do with him being at the helm. I don't think and don't know if it was necessary to have Apple buy Beats by Dre, because before Beats by Dre existed, I mean those headphones were always been expensive. They've never been cheap. But to me, in my opinion, I think that the Beats by Dre lineup, when it was owned by Monster and before that, or even like when they rebranded a little bit, they were better headphones than what Apple makes with them now. Because all they really did since then, overall, since they acquired Beats by Dre and just have re-released the same headphones pretty much every couple of years with Apple chips in them, it's the same headphone. It's just it's more expensive, or it's hard to find besides their online store. And so I don't think in my opinion, again, I don't think it was a good idea. It was for them, but I don't, as a consumer, I don't think it was a good idea for them to buy them because I have not seen personally. I have not seen enough of a overhaul or development or enough of a product improvement in the Beats lineup in any way besides the fact that it pairs up with your iPhone instantly because of the Apple chip inside of it. But besides that, the battery hasn't changed. They actually stopped making the majority of those headphones, which sucks because I remember when the whole Beats or the Beats Pro lineup was a thing, and how much I love those headphones because those things were heavy, but they sounded great. They were indestructible. The cords wouldn't break, and although those have been phased out, I think primarily that I've seen now, I will say that I have since then purchased and owned and I happily own the AirPods Max, and those are now the best headphones I've ever owned. And I don't think, and again, I don't know if there's any tech inside the AirPods Max that's from the Beats lineup in any way. I don't know about that. I've never seen anyone make that video or done any research on that, but those are the best headphones I've ever owned now, the AirPods Max. And I don't know if the acquisition of Beats by Dre has really done them a favor in the long run because again they do really scarce releases and improvements. They do new color variations. Like the last thing I heard about Beats by or Beats in general was like when they did a Kim Kardashian, I think it was coloration of to match with her makeup brand, I think it was, or her clothing brand of racing headphones that was the same color, and that was literally it. And then since then or before then, there was nothing really new. I mean, they do release new headphones every now and then, but they're really just it's like a small press release, and then they're pretty much done with it, which is fine, I guess. That's all they have to do. But the price never gets any cheaper. And again, the headphones have never, ever, to my knowledge, improved at all. Besides having the Apple chip inside them, which again is for instant pairing, so your headphones are literally synced to your phone. But again, the AirPods Max kind of made all that relevant because of how good they are. So I feel like that the AirPods Max is what the Beats by Dre situation could have been, but who knows? I mean, I also wonder if Beats by Dre stayed on their own, if they would have gotten any better because they again when they were a thing, because they were at one point the major premium headphone marketplace for anyone that bought headphones because they had a really huge lineup. It went anywhere from the the power beats in your ear stuff to I remember the solos were pretty good for a while, and then they went all the way up to the studios and to the Beats Pro. And again I love the Beats Pro because they were heavy, they were indestructible, and again they lasted for a long time. It was at least mine did. And so again they've been replaced now obviously again with the AirPods Max. That's a whole different story. But I always wonder if the AirPods Max being so well received and it's so expensive but so well received that they have kind of like butchered the Beats lineup and it being even needed anymore because of the fact that they sell so many AirPods Max. But even now in 2026, the AirPods Max really haven't had any improvements in years now. I forget when they actually released them and announced the original ones, but all they've done with them, to my knowledge, but it is to go from the Lightning plug-in to USB-C. That's literally all I've heard in the last I think 3 or 4 years with AirPods Max improvements is that they switched the cable for charging and that's it. I don't think they did anything else for audio improvements or for battery improvements. Not that it needed it, but I haven't heard anything about that. And I feel like audio in general used to be a lot more of a necessity or a lot more of a thing to work on and release cool stuff with Apple. And now it's more software. It's more devices and what software they can use and how they can seemingly add more subscriptions to stuff every time that they make an announcement. So again, I think that's all interesting. So those are the areas that I don't know if Tim Cook made the right decision or if it was the right thing to do for the company because I haven't seen anything happen with those products in a long time, if ever, or it's been a long time honestly for all that stuff. So those are kind of my nitpicky things with Apple overall since he took over. But as far as CEO, again, great job with Apple Silicon transitioning for that part of it. Beats by Dre, meh, whatever. It's become nothing since then overall. And I will say also that as far as direct Apple products go, not Apple Silicon related, I'll say that I think that right now Apple's in a weird place because they have not really reinvented the wheel in a long time. They have some great products. Again, they do. Like I will definitely admit that they have. Again, I mean, I'm not going to name them all, but Apple Watch, iPad, Mac, all that. They have great products. I think the MacBook Neo, which I'm going to do a full review on its own, is a great deal for the price. Not the hardware necessarily, but the price of the MacBook Neo is a great thing because if I was a young kid still or a teenager and wanted an Apple computer, when I was that age, an Apple computer cost like $1,000 or more at least. And so I think it's a really fantastic right idea of them and decision by them to put a MacBook Neo out there where it's a computer that's basically butchering and taking over the Chromebook market for the same price and gives you all the Apple stuff that you need as far as all the technology that's in there. For the most part, it's a great computer for what it is. And because I'm going back to school for computer science in a few months, and I even considered getting that for coding because coding doesn't require much power for that. But there is downfalls to the MacBook Neo again too because it is what it is. But I think that that's a great new product for what it is for the pricing point that it is. But we'll see. Again, for the future, to move forward in the future, for the future of Apple, we'll see. Because I personally think that Tim Cook, I think he's been ready to retire for a while, for like at least 5 years. I think it's been time for him to retire too, primarily because I don't think that Apple has really got much right now in the tank for innovation anymore, or it seems that way publicly at least, and new stuff that's really groundbreaking. I'll still watch all the keynotes and presentations, of the new iPhones and whatever they put out. And again, it all seems like it's very software based and recently, which is fine. That's all good. But even like the new, like I film on the newest iPhone, the 17 Pro Max, and to me the biggest jump forward, if you even want to call it that, was the color being orange. Like the triple camera system's been around for a long time. The software in there has kind of been the same for a while. I know it's been overhauled to like the whole glassy UI part, which is cool, but again, not really an improvement. It's just a new way to look at it. And then Apple Intelligence was a failure to launch, and now they have Siri AI, which I covered in another video, which is like again their old search acquisition from 10 years ago, now whatever it's been. That's failed too. It wasn't really working very well in the first place. So again, I think that's with Tim Cook overall. They've done some good things overall at different places, and I think he's a good person as a CEO. And I respect him for what he's done with Apple because he made them an even bigger company than Steve Jobs did at that point of what he could do with it at the time. I'll say that much. So we'll see, because again, John Ternus is coming up. I don't know what his background is besides his school and education. I don't know what he's done in the past with Apple. All it says on his his page here is again SVP of Apple of hardware engineering. And from what I've seen of his keynote presentations, is that he covers most of the integral Apple stuff, so computers and iPads, and like introduces those things. So he knows his stuff. Clearly, he knows his stuff. But that is a very different thing and a very different vibe and job than what a CEO is when it comes to guiding, directing, viewing the future of what your company, especially a company this size, for the future. And what I would love to see Apple do is to really throw things out there, kind of like the MacBook Neo did, where they break their own system. It was one of my favorite things about the Steve Jobs era of Apple is that you can never ever predict what Apple is going to be doing next, because Steve Jobs would always break the cycle of what products would come out when they come out, what season that they were on, what they come with for features, for cameras, for whatever they came with. It was always different and new and exciting. And since Tim Cook has been at the helm, again, I'm not knocking him for this, but it's just what he's done in his tenure, is that Apple has become a very stable, consistent, which is not a bad thing necessarily, but a very stable, consistent, but also very expected company, where you can literally mark your calendar to almost the day of the week these days that a new announcement will come out on, and you can almost see exactly what device it's going to be months ahead of time. So there's not really much more excitement, at least for me, about what they do anymore, which is why I think that maybe because of my age too, and just my attention span, not my but my free time to watch this stuff is a lot less than it used to be. But my excitement for Apple stuff, for new stuff, has definitely gone down in the last 10 years because I haven't seen them do anything new and exciting for a while. They've made things better, they have enhanced products, but while I say that again, when I say like not much in 10 years, is because they haven't really broken their own system. Again, they have not really thrown things out there that are, you know, affordable, I'll say, to that are brand new product pipelines, or even an attempt at something that's brand new just to see if people like it. They haven't done it in a long time. And that was one of my favorite things about Apple back in the day, was that they would just throw things out there, and if it worked, people would buy it, and if it didn't, they wouldn't. And there's even very old Steve Jobs interviews where he would literally state that that was part of the big vision of Apple during his tenure for Steve Jobs, was that he would intentionally want teams or create teams to create new stuff just to test the market with it, whether it was software or hardware. And now I think that Apple is scared of that because of how, even though they're a huge company and they dominate a huge part of the market in the world, I think that they're so afraid of like upsetting shareholders and doing weird things that don't work out and losing money on it in a way that they don't want to even try to do new things unless it's almost like a guaranteed successful story for them. And to me, that's not what technology is at all. And again, one of my favorite things about Steve Jobs back in the day was that he would always talk heavily about the integration and the married aspects of if you combine technology and humanity and art all in one thing with a good and positive intention to change people's lives, that with new stuff then you would, and it would work out in the end, in the long run. And it doesn't always work out, but you can at least try. So to wrap it up here, again with John Ternus now, again I don't know much. Again, we'll see what he does, because again all these roles are very different than CEO, and again guiding teams, managing teams, and again having a vision for the future of the company. So again, we will definitely see what he does with the last 15 years being kind of predictable, and especially the last 5 years of having literally no changes of anything of what they've done and what they've released, and how we know what's coming way early, and it's pretty easy to predict everything about it. And although it's again they continue to release good stuff, I'm not saying they don't, but the excitement factor is definitely not there anymore, or not as much, because it's all, again, the technology field right now, not talking about AI or anything like that, but just the technology field has kind of had a also a pretty big plateau, in my opinion, of excitement and of new stuff. Whereas in the early 2000s, and even in the 2010s, it was a very exciting time, because everything that was coming out was very new to market on its own. It was always a novel idea that companies were very willing to try out and lose money on. And those days are pretty much gone, or at least right now they're gone, it seems like, overall. And again, we'll see. So I'm hoping for the best for Apple in the future. I've always loved their stuff. I'll always buy it for the most part, because no other company really makes anything better than them. They might have new features first, but it's not really any better, in my opinion, for many things. And again, we'll see how John Ternus does for new CEO and what direction they go on in the next 5 or 10 years, and just see how it goes. So, in the comments, let me know what you think about everything, as far as John Ternus taking over, Tim Cook leaving Apple, and just how you think it's been the last 15 years or so, what you want to see in the future, all that kind of fun stuff. I would love to know what everyone thinks. And again, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, and of course subscribe for more content about tech. Thanks for watching as always, and I will see you all in the next one.